Today we're making cream chicken noodle soup. Not that thick floppy wall paste that you buy in the store. Real chicken broth, real vegetables, real fresh white chicken meat. Delicious. This is a recipe you're going to want. We got some white wine and some fresh chicken breast that I'm poaching for my cream of chicken noodle soup. I'm just going to simmer that. To that, I'm going to add a couple of fresh bay leaves, a touch of black pepper, a touch of white wine. It would appear that our chicken almost done. It needs probably another 5 minutes and it'll be done. And we're going to save this chicken broth for our poppycock. I just have to make sure this chicken is done. You poke into the breast and you break it open. That's done. Doesn't look raw. If there's pink juice coming out like there, that's okay, because these chicken breasts are going to be continuing to cook as they're sitting in this pan. This is another one of those little tricks where, you know, if you overcook the chicken, then it's stringy and dry and terrible. Because this chicken's never been frozen, it's going to be hard to ruin it. But now we're letting it continuing to cook as it cools off. And by the time we're ready to use it and cut it up for our chicken cream of chicken soup, it's going to be perfect and nice. And then people are going to go home and heat up the soup, and it's still going to be edible chicken. We start with unsalted butter. Now we're going to give you a recipe that's not gallons, but this is the basic hot way you start a lot of soup. You start with some sort of oil, olive oil, butter, whatever oil of your choosing, avocado oil, and then you have a mirepoix. You know, onions, carrots, celery. In the South, it's onions, celery, peppers, the Holy Trinity. Those Greeks, you know, it's onions, celery, it's usually red onions and leeks. So it's different everywhere, but, you know, most all cooking starts with a base of a mixture of vegetables and oil, and then the spices go in, their flavors and their oils, and then you add some sort of liquid or thickener. A white wine, stocks, juices, whatever that liquid may be, and then you have garnishes, and you either strain the soup or you don't. But there are certain basic steps to making soup, and 9 times out of 10, when you're starting a soup, you're starting with vegetables, some sort of fat in a pot, and you start the flavor process, and then you just start layering. Now, we're not going to be pureeing the soup, so we're going to be cutting the dice that we need. I just love my new Japanese knives. And then doing that little piece like so. You know, scraping the board with the back of the knife so I don't dull my blade. I get the cutting board off the edge of the table, and that's the best way to get your vegetables to a pot of soup. We'll get our celery. I'm going to wash it off with cold water. And an 8-inch knife, because, you know, a job like celery, you need a longer knife. You know, I turn it once, and then I've got my small dice. If you're worried about cutting yourself, just go slow. Go through the technique of doing it. Let the knife do the work. You're just holding the vegetable with your fingertips. You're pressing down firmly enough so it doesn't slip out of your hands. You got the knife angled away from you. You're letting the knife you're not going like this. You're letting the knife do the work. Gives you more control too. When you try to go straight down like that, you run the risk of doing this. You know, at the end of celery, it gets pretty cory, so you got to keep an eye on, you know, when you start losing the ribs in the middle there, then you should stop. This one was pretty good. This one went all the way down. You know, we talked about respecting food. You know, we use as much as we can. So we peel carrots from the tops. We just try to get all the blemishes off. I mean, this carrot peel is actually very good for you. A lot of nutrients in there. But aesthetically, it just doesn't look nice. But it doesn't have to be clean, so it's perfect. But I would like to see you use real carrots, peel them yourself, as opposed to buying those peeled carrots that are tumbled until they're rounded little pieces. It's just, for some reason, that doesn't seem like a real carrot to me. When you cut ends off of vegetables, you don't have to hack off a half an inch. You know, again, this is where a longer knife works best. You know, you hold the vegetable at the top, you put your knife in between, and you come down slowly. You don't try to do this fast because you poke your hand. And you get them all done at once, and then you just go down the row and cut your sticks. When you're chopping vegetables, there's not a time limit that you have to do unless you're on an episode of Chopped, okay? And even then, you have to take your time and be precise. You know, then I'll take 3 of those at a time. Start fast if you want. Once you get to the last fourth, just slow it down. Make sure you got the cut you need. Use the back of the knife to scrape. Mirepoix is 50% onions, 25% celery, 25% carrots. Boom. We put that into our pot with a pound of butter. We turn that on high. As you notice, I use a lot of bay leaves in my cooking. That's because they're good. Add white pepper. And then if you were making any type of thickened soup, which we are today, that's when you would add flour to this. Since we're using noodles, which have flour, we're going to be using flour today to thicken this up. So anybody who's gluten-free person is not buying chicken noodle soup. So I have the green light to use flour on this today. And remember before, the juice was a little pink? Look at it now. Perfectly cooked and juicy. See that? This chicken will get added back to the soup when it's finished. So we're not going to cook this chicken anymore. This chicken won't get cooked ever again unless you boil it on your own stove and you overcook it yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be moist, delicious, tender, juicy when you eat it in your soup. And you can make the pieces however big you want, but I like to keep them spoon size. You know, I like the chicken to sit on your spoon, okay? You know, if you want to go back and just give it one more, that's okay because you're not doing any damage. This is not a vegetable. You know, when it comes to meat, you can go back and not really hurt it at all if you want it into a finer piece. I keep my board clean. I keep everything pushed to one side so I'm not cutting differently than I normally would with just one lemon or something on the board. You see I got 3 fingers on the knife, cutting away from me at a 10% angle. As I get to the end, I always get a little bit slower to make sure that my knife doesn't wiggle on me or, you know, I catch a tip of a finger. You know, I've cut my finger enough times. You know, I mean, my index finger is naturally angled because I've had a few accidents. I've learned this lesson the hard way. And it's usually when you're not focusing or you're distracted that you cut yourself. You know, if you're concentrating and focused on what you're doing, that's good. If you're upset, I would not use a knife until you've washed your face and have cooled off. I mean, really, a knife is a dangerous tool and you need to be paying attention when you're using it. And if you're thinking of something else, or if you're upset about something, or if you're talking to someone, stop what you're doing and deal with that issue before you chop with a knife. Now, there's a juice in here. That's fine. That's going to give the chicken a chance to reabsorb that, stay nice and moist. But do you see how this chicken, that's cooked. I know Zach was worried because he saw pink juices, but we let that chicken continue to cook. And you can see that it's perfectly cooked. It's not dry, it's still moist. And that's gonna go in our soup at the end. All right, see how we got the bubbling here now? We'll get that all sauteed. So we're gonna add our flour. I got a pound of butter, so I put a pound of flour in. Mix that with my vegetables. Now I'm making my roux. I'm gonna mix that well. See how that's picked up all that fat? That's what we're looking for. Now we can add our white wine. We can add our chicken broth. We can add our heavy cream. You know, I just have broken up all that roux and vegetables with this whip. Looks like everything is nicely broken apart. So now we're gonna let this cook until it comes to a simmer and starts to thicken. Use any pasta you want. You can use orzo, shells, macaroni. You can take long pasta that you had left over and chop it up. You can see our soup here. It's got a little bit of viscosity, but it's still brothy. Tastes delicious. It needs a little bit of my hot sauce in there. Just a little bit of heat. Okay, this has come to a simmer. I can feel it sticking to the bottom a little bit. See how it's boiling? We turn it off. Our starch is cooked. Our cream has gotten to temperature. Now this is where you would add your chicken and your noodles. The heat's off. You know, I usually put equal parts noodles and chicken. You can do all noodles. You can do all chicken. You can do rice. You can do cooked potatoes. Whatever you want to put in your soup, you can. Basically, what I'm trying to show you here is you start soup with a mirepoix typically, or a vegetable, an oil mixture. You add seasonings and spices, saffrons, whatever. Then you thicken it up with flour, or you add your white wine and your stock. If you didn't do it with the flour earlier, or you don't thicken it at all and you add potatoes or rice to it, and season it with salt and something spicy, cayenne pepper, hot sauce, white pepper, crushed red chilies. And look at that cream of chicken noodle. Not too many noodles, not too much chicken. The vegetables are still in nice pieces. You got a nice creamy broth, chicken noodle soup, as good as grandma's, if not better. You can make it yourself. We'll send you off a recipe for a half a gallon recipe. But if you're gonna make this, you're probably gonna wanna make 2 quarts, so we'll do it for a gallon. And you can freeze it, and you can eat it yourself 1 quart a week. You can pour this over toast, pasta, mashed potatoes, rice, and have it as an entree. Cream of chicken soup. Try it. We need to see a bowl, Zach says. All right, there's a bowl of our chicken noodle soup. I just like to put a little peck, black pepper. You know, I leave the leaf in there as a garnish. If someone doesn't like it, they can just take it out. But look at that. Noodles, chicken that's still moist and delicious. A nice viscosity on the soup. You know, look, it's still a soup. It's not a stew. It's not chicken a la king. I love chicken noodle soup. I always have. That's a home run. You need to make the soup. Use whatever chicken you like. Use whatever starch you like. Rice, pasta, potatoes, whatever. You could even use beans in this. But cream of chicken soup is so delicious. One of my childhood favorites. I hope you try it. You're getting your own bowl because I'm finishing this one.